So this is what the LifeQuake process is all about. And I mean, you mentioned, of course, health and hygiene, but managing your fear mindset is super important. And there are 7 steps that go to the LifeQuake repurposing roadmap, basically. Can you share some of those steps with us so that we can learn what that looks like?
So one of the things that's happening is people are at home it's like 6 weeks now, I guess. Is I'm as I look at social media, my first stage of my model is boredom, and boredom is a very subtle stage in managing change. Most people don't pay attention to it; they just do more. They'll just eat a little more. They'll be on social media a little more. They don't pay attention to something's needing to change in their life. And
they'll run for it too, fill it up with different things rather than experiencing it. Yeah.
But it is on the emotional tone scale, with ecstasy at the top and despair at the bottom, the transition emotion right in the middle is boredom. So if we start to do an inquiry and notice, where does my energy go up? Just paying attention. I have an exercise I call connecting the dots, of just paying attention to where now, not where you've been, what your history is, or what color you liked, and how you dressed, or what kind of exercise that you did. But now, in this moment, now, what are you noticing is where your energy goes up, and and where does it not, and where does it go down? So boredom is that first stage of very subtle messages are showing you. That first job I had, I wanted to leave, but I didn't want to depend on my then fiance, who became my husband, for financial support. I was proud, and I knew that I needed to leave that job. So there were signs, and there's often signs. When I work with a client, we go back before the crisis, before their story and their victim, and we start to see when, like, he was having an affair. Okay, let's go back 5 years. Were you happy in this marriage? As an example. Okay.
Interesting. So I mean, what if we went back prior to the pandemic and we looked at how fast were we moving in life? Yes.
That's right.
And that is we've been talking a lot about the pace that is completely different and how noticeably different it is. So that's such an interesting thing, that boredom is a transition emotion. Some people run from it. Some people manage it. I've always been afraid of boredom. That's awesome. Yes. I've noticed that about myself, is that I have a fear of boredom. So I would fill my life with different things to do. Not necessary. That was an old emotion, but tell us another one of the steps of the process.
The second stage, if you keep doing this unconsciously, because there's a conscious way to do this and an unconscious way. In the unconscious way of doing stage 2 is if you keep feeding the boredom, which often people have turned to the internet, social media. That's what there's been a lot of data on internet addiction for the last 5 years now, and people turning to the internet and to social media to quell their boredom, in their job or their relationship or whatever. And so if you keep doing that, depression starts to set in stage 2. If you do it consciously, it is about what I call conscious dying, that you are literally beginning to allow for a death process to take place of an old life. And the way you see that is you'll see what's no longer viable, just like the seasons of the year, what's no longer viable. And what people do unconsciously is they up and intensify their addictions in stage 2, if they're not really doing this in an awakened state. Okay. And then stage 2 leads to stage 3, which is the radical severance stage. And if one does it unconsciously, the radical severance stage, it comes in the form of some massive crisis that gets your attention, to get your attention. And if you do it consciously, that's when you consciously say goodbye to old parts of your life that are no longer viable. Stage 4 is what I call the cosmic barbecue. And that is the in-between time when what you're being called to do is to be without identity. That period of time when, and I've got a client right now who's really feeling this very strongly. She owns airport parking lots. Okay. And you can imagine what's going on in that world.
Oh,
And
yes.
she knew. The interesting thing is, she came to me as a client before the blow up. Okay. Because she was feeling like she didn't want to do this anymore. And now she's terrified because, income has gone into nothing practically. 5 cars
Right.
in a parking that used to hold 120. So
Yes.
we were working on it. She said, I just feel like I was so accustomed to this identity. I had 50, 60 people working for me, and she had to lay them all off, except for a very skeleton crew. And she said, I feel like I don't know who I am. That's stage 4, that there's this huge opportunity in this stage to do this excavation of your shadow. What's in the cellar, what I call the cellar of your consciousness, that you've disowned, that you've denied, about yourself. And some of that is creative stuff, like juicy, creative parts of you that you felt like you couldn't address because you had to have this job with the golden handcuff syndrome. Okay. So there's an opportunity.
So we have signs or something that happens beforehand. So that was the 4th stage. What is the 5th?
Yeah. So the 5th, toward the end of the 4th stage is when, through some tools that I give, where you begin to, if you do this work to open to a calling, because I'm not a career coach in the traditional way. For me, it's a very right brain, very mystical process that involves continually humbling oneself and surrendering to spirit and listening in meditation for messages to begin moving toward what you are called to do next. What is your calling? And my friend Martin Root and I were talking on the phone the other night. We were talking about this very thing, and I adore him. But anyway, because he was one of those people I interviewed for this book that didn't have to crash and burn. He just decided this isn't anymore. And he just changed it up, one of the few. But so at the end of stage 4, you really start to get the calling. And what stage 5 is the apprenticeship stage, where you're trial and erroring with the new project or the new thing that you're wanting to do in your life. And it's important to allow yourself to be like we were when we were kids, where it was okay to experiment. It was okay to just throw things up against the wall and see what works, and really deal with taking away that success and failure concept completely, even though you're 50 years old, and how am I starting over at this age, right? And the willingness, but the most brilliant inventors, Thomas Edison, 1,000 experiments, right? Walt Disney went bankrupt 3 times. He wasn't successful till his late 50s. So that willingness to try things and if they don't work, it's what I call a successive, this comes from behavioral psychology, successive approximation to the goal. That's the key. So then stage 6, once you feel like you are in the work you're here to, you're repurposing your life. What stage 6 is about is, it's what I call it the abundance stage. It's the stage of being able to see, even if your life isn't abundant from the financial point of view, that you experience. I interviewed Shelley Campbell, who wrote The Wealthy Spirit and Zero to Zillionaire. And she talked in her book about how important it is to surround yourself with dolphins, rather than, what does she call them? The kind of fish that are really, that eat things.
Sharks.
So, thank you, sharks.
Yes.
I need to eat dinner. Anyway, so stage 6 is about how do you perceive? Yeah, I know, sharks. How do you perceive your reality from a purview of miracle making? And this I talked about actually in stage 6 when I lost everything due to mold. My home became infected with mold. And within 2 hours, I had to walk away from everything.
Wow.
In fact, I did an interview with you, the very first interview in 2002, shortly after all that happened. And And I was literally having to start over from scratch, living in a motel. And I was committed that I was going to see myself as wealthy, even without anything. I had to buy new clothes. I lost everything.
That's incredible. We just have a minute left. I wanted to get to stage 7, if we could.
Stage 7 is becoming an agent of change for the world. It's the altruism stage. Then what this does for your immune system, like I have all the data about what altruism and just acting selflessly does to strengthen your immune system. So whenever you do for others, like in this day and time when people can feel sorry for themselves, and it's understandable, especially if you've been hit hard by this, epidemic, is to, when you do something for others, even if it's just calling people just to see how they're doing,
it helps so much. It does.
Absolutely.
It helps so much. And I've noticed that as well, even with acts of compassion, the kindest, smallest acts of compassion, even in your thoughts, not reacting on Facebook, helping a neighbor, calling your parents, all of those good things. Well, this is definitely, you are an expert in LifeQuakes. I have looked at your life and how many times you have been resilient with change. And it's wonderful that you've created a process to help people around this. Thank you so much, Dr. Toni Galardihis. And thank you for helping us learn how to get through these LifeQuakes.